Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well because today we're talking about music and today we're looking at the debut album from UK prog rock legends. Yes, so their debut album, self-titled, not self-titled in the way the Yes album is self-titled, but self-titled in the way that it is called Yes. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I've been just kind of jumping around their discography, sort of picking and choosing the albums that I've been listening to at that time to do a review of. I'll get to all of them. I'll get to all of them eventually. There's a few I don't have physical copies of yet, but I'd say I've got like 90% of it physical, so that's great. Woohoo for that. Uh, as I said, though, this is the debut album, and I'm going to hold up this version of it here. Now, this is not obviously the proper cover. This is two originals of Yes, but you'll notice when I flip it over, what are those two originals? You've got Yes, the album there, and Time and a Word. And I actually picked this copy up off of Discogs shortly after finding a nice copy of Time and a Word on vinyl, which is cool to have. I do like having the actual album itself, but this is a much cheaper way to have both of those albums. Now, something kind of cool about mine is that here's the inner sleeve. Let's see if you can spot the error. So there's two albums that should be on here. This edition just has the same cover both times for the debut. It's supposed to have on one side Time and a Word and then Yes on the other. That's fine. I like duplicate. I got double vision, so I see four. There you go. So the album, let's get to the album. This is the debut album, as I said. It was released on July 25th, 1969 by Atlantic Records. So the band, they had only been around a little bit before this. They actually formed in the summer of 1968, famously playing their first gig on August 4th of that year. And they were actually signed to Atlantic by March of 69. It's not a lot of turnaround. And I think you hear that on this album. It doesn't feel like a debut. It doesn't feel like a band finding themselves. Now their sound would change pretty dramatically, pretty quickly, but you don't get that like humming and hawing. What kind of music are we going to play on this album? It's solid right from the start. Kind of music the band plays later, totally different, but it's solid from the start on here. So they entered March 69, advising and Trident Studios in London to record their first album. This album also has two covers on it. It's got Every Little Thing by the Beatles and I See You by the Byrds. So who makes up the lineup for Yes for their debut? You've got John Anderson on lead vocals and incidental percussion, which I had to look up, which is his, if you've ever seen them live or you've seen recordings of them live, you know, he's got his little setup of whatever noisemakers and stuff. That's what that is. It wasn't accidental percussion, but I would really like to see that. Peter Banks on guitar and backing vocals, Chris Squire, who would actually be the only band member to stay in Yes the entire time up until his passing away, on bass and backing vocals, Tony Kaye on organ and piano, and Bill Bruford, famous name, on drums and vibraphone. So the album itself received a lot of critical acclaim. Critics seemed to really enjoy it, but it didn't chart at all. I mean, it's a debut band. And I think their first single, which we'll get to, was a weird choice and wasn't really representative of the album as a whole. And I think that may have impacted why it didn't get a lot of pickup from, a potential fan base. So the two singles were Sweetness, which was the first one, and Looking Around. So a little bit of background on the recording. They had never recorded before. Go figure. So they actually had a lot of technical difficulties. They had spent 2 days trying to get Tony Kaye's keyboard to work. They thought it was a Hammond organ, so they were futzing around with all the electronics and trying to get that to work to play correctly. They ended up renting one out because actually what Kaye had is a Vox Continental labeled as a Hammond. So that would have different hookups, different wiring setups, all that kind of different stuff going on. It was also Bill Bruford's first time in a professional recording studio. There are some earlier things of Bruford recording, but this is the first time in a professional studio. And he didn't enjoy it greatly from a lot of kind of what you can hear online. It was very it took him a lot of time to get to that point of enjoyment and figuring out how do things work live versus how do they work in the studio. What made it great for him was when he realized he could control the volume of different band members and different instruments within his headphones. And after that, he was a-okay. Only we could all do that in real life. So we can talk a little bit about the sleeve design. This is a really cool design. They didn't stick with it for long. They would go with the more kind of Roger Dean artwork going forward, but that's a pretty cool design. So the album was packaged in a gatefold sleeve with the UK pressing featuring the word yes in blue and red inside a speech bubble, what we just saw, against a plain black background. The sleeve is actually designed by Crosby, Fletcher, and Forbes, a design collaboration between graphic designers, you're never going to guess it, Theo Crosby, Ellen Fletcher, and Colin Forbes. Things you can learn, hey? Thank goodness I'm here. All right, let's do the track by track. So we got 8 tracks on this album, 4 on each side. Generally speaking, I like side 2 more, but we'll get to that. But like I said, this album sounds like nothing else in their catalog, but still very accomplished. It's not fledgling in any way. It's much more kind of a little more jazzy, more psychedelic pop, kind of lighter rock than the rest, even their Time and Word, the direct follow-up to this. And it's just really cool. I think now that I've sort of given them both critical listens, I might prefer this one a little more to Time and a Word. I think Time and a Word might be a bit more emblematic of what Yes kind of sounds like in general, but I do like a lot of the tracks on here quite a bit. Let's get to it. Track 1, Beyond and Before. What strikes me on this track is, and it's true for almost the rest of the album, how much Chris Squires and Bill Bruford show up on these tracks. So many of these songs, and it's not to say the rest of the band is any slouches or they're not present, but so many tracks on here feel like the bass and the drums are the star. And you get that from here. I think this is a really strong opening track. It really shows what the band is capable of and what you can do and what to expect mostly for the rest of the album. I See You is the next one. That's their Birds cover, but it's really unique. It's got a really, really jazzy showcase from Bruford. There's a really good instrumental jazzy package that also has Banks doing some great jazz guitar work, but it comes across that he is capable, a jazz guitar player, though he is not, at least on this track here. There's not a lot of virtuosity going on, but a lot of competent playing. Really good track. I like that one a lot. Yesterday and Today follows that up. It's a bit more subdued, but I think it's a really good track to show the vocal range of John Anderson. He is a fantastic vocalist, very, very powerful, but also very, very gentle as well. And I think this track showcases that. You also get to see a different side of Tony Kaye on keyboards. One that, he's not going to be in the band for that long, but they didn't really utilize that much. Most of Tony Kaye's work is a lot of kind of chunky Hammond chords, which I really like. I love that sound, especially on the Yes album. But he's also really great at doing other stuff as well. So it's a nice ballad. Then we're going to end side 1 with Looking Around, which is like jolt right back into action. Feels again like a Squire and Kaye joint. There's some really memorable hooks, and you can kind of see a little bit of what the band builds up into on this track here. It's a really good way to close the side. I always like albums that open up with high energy, close the side with high energy, and kind of do that again. So just tricky for bands, that means you might need 4, energetic 2 tracks, but we got it. I think the piano hook on here is one of the things that sticks with you. This is also the second single that was released October of 1969. So that's side 1. Side 2 opens up with Harold Land, which for me is another Chris Squire highlight. This whole album is a great bass album. If you're into bass guitar, rock music with a lot of great bass work, this is one for you. It almost feels like the song is being led by the bass quite often. Maybe when you're listening to some rock music, it feels like we're being led by the guitar or being led by, the vocal, the melody, but here it feels like the bass. Really good song. Next, we're going to do Every Little Thing, the cover. Starts out with a drum attack from Bruford, probably the most aggressive he gets on this album. It's really, really good. The rest of the track, though, feels like a really great showcase for the band. It feels like the band is confident in what they do. You're not going to be a band that doesn't know what they're doing and record a track like this. So it's a great cover track. Sweetness is a ballad, and it was released as the first single in July of 1969. And it's fine. It's like a run-of-the-mill pop song. And there's nothing really offensive about it, but I do wonder why it was chosen as the first single. It's not really representative of the band's sound as a whole, of the album as a whole. It's fine, but I almost feel like it could have been either the second single or kind of, the on-album B-side from another single they could pick, maybe even Survival, which we'll get to because we're going to close the album with Survival. Another really great highlight. For me, this is maybe the most Yes sounding song on the album. We're getting a little more of that symphonic vibe, symphonic feeling on here. Lyrically, it's very John Anderson-y. A lot of these are John Anderson lyrics. And what that means is how we just moved there. That's what that means. Hippy dippy, free flowing. Like the track itself is about the splendor and beauty of nature and how that's overhead. And I like that. Me as a person, I really like that. But it feels very John Anderson. I'm here for it. It's another really kind of cohesive closing coda from the band, and I like it a lot. It's a great way to end the album. This is also probably the most prog rock the album gets. So if you want to hear the earliest Yes leanings doing that kind of progressive rock sound, check out the song Survival. The rest of the album is really good too, but it's more psychedelic pop, psychedelic rock, really hooky, really good melodies. But Survival will be the most progressive. And with that, 8 tracks, 4 on each side. That's the debut album from Yes. And again, like I said, I think generally in my head, I always said I preferred Time and a Word. I think now that I've been listening to both, more critically to write out reviews for all of you folks. Thanks for watching this far. If you have, I think I prefer this. It's a little more accomplished, I guess. Like I think Time and a Word is them figuring out how to do symphonic progressive rock, whereas this is they already know how to do psychedelic pop and rock, and that's great on here. So yeah, that's my debut of the debut, or my debut. That's my review of the debut from Yes. And who knows what album we're going to do next. We're jumping around the catalog all over the place. I was thinking Tormato. I like that one a lot, and I think a lot of people should give that one more listens than it deserves. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Bye.